with Posh Pooch Designs, and this is our live video chat for Tuesday. Every Tuesday, I try to have a live video chat to talk about some new topics and to discuss new patterns and yarns. And today I have with me Maximo. He's one of my little chihuahuas, and he is showing you our new crochet pattern. There's Rosie. And this is a slide-on dog bandana. It works for cats too, just don't put the dog bone on there. Good morning, Jen. And all you have to do is make it, slide it onto your dog's existing collar. There's Rosie. She knows I have a cookie hidden in my pocket. Give them a cookie so they can go lay down. Here you go, good girl. Oh, no, this one's for your brother. There we go. Well, what I was talking about, sit down, sweetheart. There we go. Good job. Is this new pattern. It's a dog bandana. The pattern's completely adjustable for any size dog. And you just slip it. Let me unhook this. You just slip it onto your dog's bandana or your dog's collar. Good morning, Stacy. And you just click it. And I thought I'd just go ahead and show it to you at the beginning of the video, so Maximo and Rosie can go lay down. They're such good babies. They're the best dog models in the whole wide world. Well, remember I told you I had lost my Posh Pooch Designs coffee mug. I still have not found it. I don't know where it went, but I still have not found it. And I even, like I said before, I completely cleaned out my yarn room, looked through all my baskets and all my leftovers and even all my new stuff, and I have not been able to find it. Good morning, Rosie. She's my kissy girl. That's Rosie Bell. Well, anyway, I was walking through Walmart, and I have no idea why I took a cut down the coffee cup aisle, but I found a new mug that I just had to have. It says, "My dog is cuter than yours," and it's got all these paw prints all over it, and I thought, I have got to have that coffee mug. Good morning, Judy. Good morning, Sharon. So anyway, if you've got your coffee or tea or whatever you're drinking today, clink in. And remember, I love to know where you're from. So don't put your address. Just put your state. Or like if you're in North California or South Texas, you know, something like that. Or you're in Germany or wherever. I don't think I've ever had anyone clink in from Brazil. I was thinking about that the other day because I was looking on where my blog and my YouTube reaches, because it gives me schematics or whatever you call it, analytics, to show me where everybody's watching my things from and looking on my blog from. And I have quite a few followers from Brazil. You know, those crocheters are very talented. They have a lot of really creative patterns down in Brazil. I'm really kind of surprised they even want to look at my stuff. Good morning, Karen. Is it damp there? The weirdest thing, Saturday morning, I got up early because I take my medicine at 5 in the morning. I looked out the bathroom window in my bedroom. It was a blizzard. Okay, so then about 10 o'clock, it turned to like slush. And then by 2 o'clock, it was like 60 or 70 degrees. It was gorgeous and the sun was shining. So that's what Colorado is like south of Denver. I live in Parker, south of Denver. And I love living here because we're on, we have about 5 acres and we're kind of in the country. And yet I'm close enough to town to get to the yarn stores. Well, I hope everyone's clinking in today, and I hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday. You live in Nevada. I have family in Pahrump, Nevada, and Las Vegas, Nevada. Both my father-in-law lives in Nevada, and let me tell you a little secret. I got married in Nevada, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, that was 35 years ago. And it was a church wedding, and Elvis did not marry us. Although I have said to my husband, it would be so much fun to go down to one of those little chapels and have Elvis marry us, just for fun. All right, let's get to our topic. And today's topic is part 2 of how to read a crochet pattern. And I have a question for you. I had someone message me and tell me they couldn't read the paper that everything was backwards. And so, good morning, Elizabeth. Thanks for joining in. And so what I did is I put it, can you read this? Tell me if you can read this. I took a picture of the pattern and then I reversed it so that you could see it, because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And I tried to make it great big so that you could see it. And I want to review just a little bit of what we talked about last week. Let me know if you can't see it and I'll turn it the other way. Yes, okay, good. Because I had it this way last week and they said they can't see it. So I think when I'm doing the live video with Facebook, they reverse it. And so then when you see it, you're seeing the opposite of what I'm doing. So you can you read this one, Stacy? It's perfect. Thank you. Because I want you to see what we're doing here. All right, so we talked about skill, and I didn't put that part on there. And remember, there are 4 levels of skill when it comes to a crochet pattern. And then there's a few in between. You've got beginner, you've got easy, intermediate, and what I call super, super, super hard. Experienced. So, but sometimes I will put a pattern and I'll put it at like easy intermediate, and I'll put easy moderate but not intermediate. And that's because I might have you do a twist or place something in a place that's not naturally done. But all patterns have a skill level, and make sure you pay attention to that. And remember, because I get this question all the time, that easy and beginner are not the same thing. Beginner is even easier than easy. It should be easy, easier, easier, and even more easy or something, you know. For those of us who don't know what all the terms mean. And that's why it's so important to learn to read a pattern. Even if you are talented and can look at something and just make it, you know, like I am. It's a good idea to get an understanding of how to read a pattern, because you're missing out on tons of beautiful and wonderful patterns if you don't at least get a little bit of knowledge of how to read a pattern. All right, so the next part here is the stitches. And they'll always, do remember every pattern writer is different, but there are certain things that patterns should have. And of course, we talked about stitches. Though usually you'll have the word written out, and then it'll be in parentheses or not, or it might have a space, but you'll get the abbreviation. And those are the abbreviations that are used in the pattern. So those all should be there. And when you're reading the pattern portion and you don't know what an abbreviation is, you need to refer up here. And if it's not there, message that pattern designer and tell her she forgot something. And I tell you what, I've had people message me because I've spelled things wrong, or because I left off something they needed, like that abbreviation. And as a pattern designer, I appreciate it. I want to know, because I want everyone to be able to work my patterns. So pattern designers do appreciate those things, okay? Now underneath here, if there's a special stitch, like for instance, I love the V-stitch and I use different variations of it, and there's probably 100 different variations of a V-stitch. And so what I'll do is you'll find, and other designers do it too, in this section, it'll say special stitches. And then it'll say, you know, like mine would say V-stitch, and I might put in parentheses my version, you know, and then I'll explain to you what that is, so that when you're referring down in the pattern, you'll know what my version of the V-stitch is. If it's not there again, contact the pattern designer, because it might just be an honest mistake. You know, like me, I have several people that read and help me with my math and help me with my grammar, even though I have grammar check and all of that stuff, but they get used to how I write. And so they might understand what I'm saying because they're used to what I'm doing. But somebody else who's never who's never read one of my patterns may not understand what I'm talking about. So it's a good idea to get some outside information. One time I got this message through Ravelry, and I had misspelled a word, but in misspelling the word, it was a nasty word, and I didn't know it was in there. And the sad thing is, I had done 3 sizes, and so I just copied and pasted that line in my pattern in all 3 of those sizes. And this wonderful lady, she was so nice, she messaged me and she said, "I'm sure this isn't what you meant to say here. You might want to check this word." And I was like, "Thank you so much," because it was spelled correctly in spell check. My testers didn't catch it, but it was not a bad, it was a bad word that I didn't want in that pattern. So yes, pattern designers appreciate it. So we talked about that. Now the next section here is size. And usually your pattern designer will tell you inches or sizes. I might say extra small, small, medium, large, and tell you approximately what those inches are. Now in crochet, a lot of times you'll get gauge. And when you're working a blanket or something that you need to make a gauge swatch for, and that is so that your stitches come out to be the same as the pattern designer's stitches. Because I tend to be a loose crocheter. Remember, I'm a loose hooker. And other people are tight crocheters. And so it's a good idea to make a gauge swatch. Now, sometimes in crochet, it's not really necessary. For instance, a good example is my 6-inch squares that we're doing monthly. Now, I don't need to put a gauge swatch in there because you know that you need to meet the gauge at 6 inches because it's a 6-inch square. And so sometimes it's not necessary. And other times, if they're working off inches, and remember, I always say that your tape measure is one of your most important tools in your crochet bag. So that's where a gauge swatch will come handy. Okay? Now, this one, as you can see, it says 3 chains per inch plus 5. And what that is you're going to get a repeat. And this is a bracelet, a pattern that I did for my grandson. And so what we're doing here is you're measuring your wrist. 3 chains equal an inch. So if your wrist is 10 inches, you need to multiply times 3. So 3 times 10 is 30 chains. Plus you need 5 additional chains. And for this pattern, those 5 additional chains are a loop. And sometimes it has to do with whether you're going to start with a single, triple, double, half double, and you're going to need different amounts of chains at the end because, for instance, if this was a double crochet bracelet, I would have you add those 3 extra chains, and then we would begin our double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook, and those first 3 chains would count as your first double crochet. Now, usually with a chain 1, you're going to start in the, single crochet or a slip stitch. You'll start in the 2nd chain from the hook. And that first chain basically is acting as a chain 1 or a turning chain and doesn't count as a stitch. It just helps everything lay nicely. So it's not a tight turn. And it gives everything a nice flat appearance. And so those chain 1s are very important. And however many chains at the end are very important, depending on where you're going to stitch your first stitch. All right, so let's look back at this pattern. It says, pattern is written for a 6-inch wrist. 3 times 6 is 18, plus 5, so you're going to need 23 chains. And this is for my grandson's wrist. He got an itty-bitty wrist. And so another thing you might find here is they'll say a repeat. A pattern might be written in 12 plus 7, 12 repeats plus 7, or 5 repeats plus 7. And what they're telling you is you can make the pattern as wide as you want to, but you're going to need to do it in increments of whatever they tell you, for instance 5, in order for the pattern or whatever the pattern the designer's written that you're going to need. One thing to remember, I get this question often, I'm off by 1. If you're off by 1 at the end and you've done everything across the same, I wouldn't worry about that too much on your first row because it's just your chain. Make sure you've counted those stitches and your pattern is correct. Go back over. For instance, if you're doing, let's say, a shell stitch and you get to the end and it says you need 10 shells, shell stitches, and you get to the end and you're like, oh, I got 1 chain left. And when that's your beginning chain, don't worry about it too much if it's one, because it's really easy to accidentally stitch in both sides of the chain when you're doing a beginning chain. But it's really important to make sure when they say on that first row you need 10 shells that you've got those 10 shells, or your pattern's not going to work. Okay? But if you've got those 10 shells and you've got, like, 2 or 3 stitches, then there's an issue and you have skipped something in there and you need to fix it. This is where I always say, again, your measuring tape is very important. Measure it. If they said it should be a 10-inch, sideways, and you've only got 4 inches, there's an issue. It might be that you need to go up or down a hook size, or you might need to, you've chosen the wrong yarn. And that's where on the other one, where we had the materials list, make sure you get the right yarn. And if you choose a different yarn, because you always can measure, measure, measure. For instance, I love to make bags, and I've got one here just as an example for shopping, and this is made out of just cotton. This is peaches and cream or sugar and cream cotton. But if I decided I wanted to make a bag like this and use chunky yarn, I need to make sure and understand that it's going to be a lot bigger bag. But if I want it to be the same size, only chunky, then measure and don't do as many stitches. And that's where you're going to have to use your creative juices a little bit. And if you change yarns, you're going to have to change your hook. And make sure you use the hook that's recommended on the yarn you're changing to. But you don't have to if you measure. Okay? So this is where a lot of crocheters are extremely technical. And they want everything technical. I am more the artistic type crocheter. And like I said, if I'm off by one at the end, I just don't worry about it. And then when I get to the next row, if I've got what the pattern says I've got to have, then I just keep going. And a lot of people can't deal with that. No, I've got one extra. And if you can't deal with it, then you have to rip it out and start over. So it's just kind of up to you whether you're technical or whether you're artistic when it comes to crochet. All right, so I've explained this part. Now, another thing I want to explain in a pattern is sometimes you'll see the little star, and it'll say something like 3 double crochets, chain 2, 2 half double crochets, and then it'll have a little star. And what that means, and then it'll say repeat from star to star 5 times or 2 times or whatever. What they're asking you to do is the section that's between those 2 little stars, to repeat that across the row in each stitch. It should say 3 double crochets in the next stitch, chain 2, 4 double crochets, skip 2 or whatever. And it's telling you to make 1 in each stitch. Now, when they're wanting you to do a whole section of stitches in 1 stitch, it'll usually be in parentheses. Like it'll say, you'll be going along 1 half double crochet in the first 10 stitches. Then it'll say in the next stitch, and it'll have parentheses. And in between those parentheses, it'll say 5 double crochets. And then it'll go to and then after that, it should be a comma or something, and it'll say 1 double crochet in the next 5. And what they're saying is sometimes it'll be in parentheses and sometimes it won't. But if you see the parentheses, they're usually asking you to work everything between those parentheses in the next stitch, unless stated. Now remember, don't just assume. Always read through the pattern as what it's stated. Okay? I forgot to ask you all, did you do your homework and get your pattern? This pattern will be on the blog, and also I'll link it to this video as well on Facebook and YouTube, so you can go and get the pattern and practice it. I just wanted you to have something to look at and be a little bit familiar. But if you're not, this is a super duper easy pattern. Okay? All right, so let's begin working the pattern. Now, you'll usually see an R, 1, and so forth. The R represents rows and rounds. And all of them are the same because they start with an R. And it will tell you, you should have a section up here. If there's anything complicated that you need to know, it'll say notes. And in those notes, it will tell you a chain 1 does not count as a stitch, or the chain 3 at the end of the road, at the end of the row or the end of the round does count as a stitch, or a chain 4 counts as a double crochet chain 1. Those things will be in that notes section. Another thing you'll see in the notes section is something that says rounds are joined with a slip stitch, or rows always end with a chain 1. Sometimes they'll put those kind of notes there. I need to make sure you read those, because not every pattern designer does the same thing at the end of their rows or rounds. For instance, when working amies, you don't join in chain 1, you work in a continuous round, and you have to mark it with stitch markers. Where maybe a coaster, like some of mine, I'll have you work all the way around, I'll join, and then I'll have you, chain 3 because it's double crochets maybe, and then you'll work around and join. So don't assume if it's working around you don't have to join. And joins should almost always be with a slip stitch, but sometimes, because of a certain pattern that a pattern designer is trying to do, or a certain technique, they might not have you do that. And that's where you need to read those notes. Always read them. That's all the little extra juicy stuff in there. Sometimes they'll have something written about the sizing, or how to join maybe squares together, or something different about this pattern that you're not used to will be in those notes, and that's a very important section. Now this pattern doesn't have a notes section because it's just 2 rows, and so I got all the information you need in there. Okay, so for row 1 we're going to chain 23 and just turn. And one of the questions I get all the time is, when a pattern says turn and chain 1, is it the same thing as chain 1 and turn? Yes. Sometimes some pattern writers just write it that way, but it's the exact same thing. And depending on if you're changing colors, I might just put turn, and then when you go to like the next row, it'll say change to red or color 2 or 3, and then chain 1. When you're changing colors, always do that chain 1 through whatever after you do the color change. Because if you're doing even a circle, you'll end up, for instance, if you do a double crochet row and your next row is purple and you were doing red and you chained 3, if you chained 3 in that color from the previous row, the chain 3 counts as your first double crochet, so you'll have 1 double crochet here that's the wrong color. And it's the same thing when you're working in rounds. Unless you're just working in rounds continuous like amies, you're going to change colors before you do your chain. You're going to join, change colors, and then do your chain 1 through chain whatever. That way you avoid having that extra color from the previous round or rows. All right? And that's another thing that we talk about all the time. So basically, and I'm actually wearing the bracelet that we're doing, but I've got a small one here that's written according to the pattern. And so you're chaining across 3 times the inches, and then you're going to chain 5. And the reason it doesn't say chain 1 is because the chain 5 is included with what we did. So we chained 23 and we just turned. All right, so we've got a chain and we just turned. So then it says slip stitch in the 5th chain from the hook. And let me show you this one, like I said, that I already made. And the reason you don't have the chain 1 or whatever on row 1 is because it's already included in our original chain. And then you're going to count back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then slip stitch, and that's what forms this little button loop for you to button your button in. This is a fun project to do for, like, say, Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or a church activity or crafts, or even if you just want to, I've used it just to teach ladies how to begin crocheting in a group. And they bring like the greatest buttons and fun, crazy yarns, and you can make some really cute little bracelets. So anyway, oops, almost turned it the wrong way. So that's what that's all about. So we've got 1 slip stitch. So what's a slip stitch? Here it is up here. Here's our abbreviation. In the fifth chain, what's a CH? Here's our chain up here from the hook. And that just means you've got a loop on your hook and then you count back 5. Okay? And then it says slip stitch in the 5th chain from the hook to form the button loop. And then the next portion down here says 1 slip stitch in each chain across, tie off. And tie off is when you just cut your yarn and pull your loop through that last loop and snug it down a little bit. And that's also telling you here, leave a 6-inch tail of yarn for sewing your button on. When you're doing a project like this, the least amount of weave-ins you can do is better. I hate weaving in ends, but if you can use it to sew on a button or a ribbon or whatever, just like this flower that's back here on my last row, I leave a long tail. Then I can use that tail to sew it on. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But anyway, sew your button, push in through the button loop, and wear your bracelet. And of course, this is a really beginner pattern and a really easy pattern. And this is, like I said, I really encourage you to learn, because once you learn the top part of the pattern, I've got this other one that's backwards, but your skill, your materials, your stitches, all of these things, once you learn all of those, it all comes really easy. And the truth is, like I said last week, learning to read a pattern is like learning a foreign language. And the only way that you can do that is practice. And another thing that you can do that I found really helpful in working with other people is to go to the all-free crochet pattern website. They have tons of tutorials and also tons of explanations of things that, you know, I may forget today, but just the basics. Another place you can go is the Crochet Guild of America, because some of the most important things to learn is using the right materials, the right crochet hook, the right yarn for the project. When a pattern designer designs a pattern, I mean, I know for me, a lot of times the pattern comes from the yarn. In other words, I look at the yarn and it tells me what it wants me to make out of it from my brain. I have a weird brain like that. You know, so the pattern and the materials are very important. The hook is very important. And every time I design something, you know, it's from my heart, it's art. And then it's just, I can't even think of the right word, but just art. But also, those abbreviations are really the key to understanding how to read a pattern. And I hate abbreviations. We spent, you know, almost 20 years in the Air Force, my husband did, and the military is all about abbreviations, and I hate them. And acronyms, I guess, which call them. But it also helps move along faster in a pattern. You know, if you know, okay, you always know in a pattern CH is going to be chain. You always know in a pattern that ST is going to be stitch. SP will be space. And those are things that as you get going and learn to read patterns, that you'll realize it'll open up a whole world of wonderful patterns that you didn't, you know, you may be afraid to try because you were afraid to read the pattern. So do yourself a favor, sit down, you know, once every couple of weeks and just work a, you know, really easy pattern that you know, but go by the pattern, not just what you know. And look at the pattern, read the stitches, read the notes, the materials, and before you know it, you'll be going, oh, this was so easy. You know, it's just like, you know, maybe sitting in your Spanish class in high school or German class or something. You know, before long, it's just natural to you. And so I really encourage you to learn. I really do. And the other thing I just wanted to say, if you ever have a question that you don't know my pattern or somebody else's or just something you're working on and it's not working out or whatever, always feel free to ask me a question. You can ask it on my Facebook. You can send me a message. You can send me a text, an email. And my email address is on everything, all my pictures and everything. And if you can't find it, my website's on there. If you just go to my website, it'll send you, you can go to my email as well. So always feel free to ask a question. Okay? because I know I rushed through this kind of, but this pattern is really, really simple. So, and this is such a fun pattern. I'm just wearing this because it's so pretty and cute. All right, so a couple of things I wanted to tell you about this week. Also, when I was walking through Walmart and bought my new mug. Is that not the cutest thing? I think it was $2.97. Definitely worth $3. I noticed that I was swinging by the yarn. Actually, I was going towards the shoe department. And I noticed they had some Red Heart yarn on clearance. And just so that you know, this is not discontinued from Red Heart, but it is a Red Heart yarn. And this is their t-shirt yarn. And I got these for $1.50 a piece. And I went ahead and bought 4 of these. And mine had more colors, and I already had some of these. So if you run by your Walmart, these are perfect for making shopping bags or purses. They also make great blankets and mats for your dogs. And you can even make a really good rug for in front of like your wash machine or something. Just like a mat to go out on the deck or whatever. This is t-shirt yarn. Let me grab my glasses real fast. I was going to tell you. It's a 5. So, and they recommend, I think it's a J hook, I hook. So, and I was going to look at the ounces real quick. 3.5 ounces. And so for a couple of bucks, you can get some really good deals on that yarn. I also noticed that in my Walmart that they haven't got the new yarns in yet. And Walmart, or let me start over. Red Heart has some new yarns coming out that are similar to the cake yarns. They have a gradient yarn, and then they also have the thick striping yarn that has a gradual change. So I'm looking forward to getting some of those in, and I'll share those with you when I get them. The other thing I noticed that Walmart had all their peaches and cream on rollback for $1.50, and I have a few more cotton projects to do. So I picked up a couple of those, and those are just a rollback that they had there. I'm not promoting Walmart. I just happened to walk by there and saw some good deals. All right, so let's talk about what's going on this week at Red Heart. No, let's talk about what's going on at Posh Pooch Designs this week. So I showed you the dog collar. I don't know if you guys saw it at the beginning of the video. I was trying to get Max and Rosie to model for you a little bit. All they were interested in was cookies. But this is just a slide-on dog collar. It goes, dog bandana. Goes right on your collar, like this. And the pattern is completely adjustable for any size dog, cat, goat, whatever, horse that you want. And I also have a pattern for the little dog bone on there. And of course you can use whatever applique you want. But that's something we already did. And then what's coming this week is I'm going to do a video called Fun with Flip-Flops. And I got the idea because I was watching Big Bang Theory, and they're always doing fun with flags. I thought, what a great idea. So anyway, I'm going to do fun with flip-flops. And it's just going to be a fun way to do some different things with flip-flops to make them pretty and fun to wear. So that's one thing we're going to be doing this week. I've got a couple more of that to get ready. And then this one is a pattern I did a few years ago. And let me move Maximo's chair over a little bit so you can kind of see. And how this is made is with a beach towel. And you can see it's just wrapped around. And they're really great. And we used some beads and crocheted around. And then we made the straps and the flower. And it's held on. My mannequin doesn't have any arms, so I pinned it onto the back. But basically, I almost knocked her over. Basically, you put one arm in, wrap it around your back. Actually, you put this arm in, wrap it around your back, and then you put your other arm in. And by it crossing on the top, it holds it in place. And then the little flower just sits wherever. You don't have to put the flower if you don't want to. I just really liked it, and I put the straps on and added some little beads for fun. And I made one of these a few years ago, and my husband and I were going on a cruise. We were going on a cruise to Alaska, and I never got to wear it. It was way, way too cold. But I used it a lot here, and it's worn out, and I needed a new one. And then someone asked me if I could show again how to do this. Now, about this is you can also use, I thought I brought it up here. I guess I didn't. It's okay. But you can also use, for a child size, you can use your bathroom hand towel size. And it works perfect because I wrapped it around one of my granddaughters. And because of the way it wraps, it's a nice length and they won't trip over it. And some of the beach towels are bigger and smaller than others. And so it's kind of up to you. You can kind of measure yourself around and see which one's going to work, because you do want it to wrap. So anyway, that's something fun that I'm working on this week. And then I still have this one to finish up the video. So, and this one's kind of neat because I showed it to you last week, but you can make it as long as you want. And it's really, really stretchy. It's really perfect for your farmer's market. And ours here is getting ready to open. They usually open it the Saturday before Mother's Day. So, but anyway, that's what's going on this week at Posh Pooch Designs. I hope I answered some of your questions about how to read a pattern. And if you ever, like I said, have a question, feel free to ask me, and I will do everything I can to answer it or find you an answer. So, thanks for being with me today. Thanks for sitting and having a cup of coffee and chatting with me today. Have a wonderful week. And just a note, next week we're going to be discussing yarn.